Representative Alleman?
Excuse.
Representative Angelos?
Excuse.
Here. Representative Haroldson?
Here.
Representative Pendergraft?
Here.
Representative Sherwood?
Here.
Representative Smith?
Here.
Chairman Baird?
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Mr. Representative. Are we live?
Yes.
Mr. Secretary, I assume you're going to be providing us with a rundown on House Bill 47?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really appreciate it. And I just want to tell you, I'm so looking forward to working with this committee. I think if it's all right, we'll kind of run down what the bill does, and you can let me know if we're getting too far. I know you have a lot to do, but House Bill 47 is about expedited filings. And we're one of the few states that has a statutory deadline in statute. Most states do not. And instead, they have an option for somebody to opt into what's called an expedited filing, where they can get the filing back by a date certain. Now, in Wyoming, we have a deadline, a 15-day deadline that we always meet. When we had our white powder incident, we were on day 14, but we've never passed it. And that's something we're very proud of. However, there has seemed to be an interest from the business community, even with our 15-day deadline, of having some way for them to get quicker service. Often it's in the context of an M&A, a merger and an acquisition, where they need to have the filing done by the end of the day, or within 2 days or 3 days, sometimes even within the hour. And oftentimes those businesses are willing to pay those fees. In Delaware, for example, there's basically no deadline. The only way to know when you're gonna get your filing back is an expedited filing. So this is a little different from how most states do expedited filing, but we still feel it's very important. We are all about increasing service in the Wyoming Secretary of State's office, and I am very supportive of this bill. The only problem is where we are on staffing. Just to give some context here, we have about 70% of the filings of Delaware. We just passed Delaware on per capita filings, by the way, a big deal. We have about 70% of the work of Delaware, and we have 10% of the staff. Delaware has over 110 people, we have 11. And so we're also being asked to take on top of our existing workload, a lot of new duties. One being expedited filing, 2 being increasing our audits. So we take on fraud, which is a huge priority of our administration. Don't forget, we took on Kim Jong-un and we won. And then, all of the anti-fraud efforts that we're doing in our office. So we've really tapped out our cross-divisional help. It's just, we have up to 40% of FTEs in other divisions doing business filings. We've capped out our overtime. Our temp budget is already, we've used a lot of our temp budget, only being about a quarter of the way through the biennium. We do need to have some action here. So we've requested 3 positions in the budget. We stand by that request. That is very necessary. But in light of some of the conversations this year, did kind of want to back up, specifically related to the duties incurred by this bill, which we approximate to about a half an FTE, which of course you can't have half a body. So that's rounded up to 1. And we would like to attach 1 position to this bill. Now, we're very clear in subsection C that if 1 or more positions, whether it's 3, 2, 1, in the budget, this provision would go away with that subsection C in section 2. So we're not trying to stack positions, not trying to trick anybody. And we stand by our budget request and feel that is the best vehicle to get this done. But just in case that something falls through or whatever, we would like to attach 1 position to this vehicle with an exemption if, with the statement that it would go away if 1 or more positions is in the budget. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, I have a question to start us off here. It looks like this, as I recall, the positions in HB1, this was the bottom tier of the 3 positions you requested. Is that accurate?
Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to Mr. Rubino. I believe it's the top tier that we requested off this.
This is the top tier?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there were 3 positions requested, one at each tier. The Senior Consumer Support Specialist, BACA 08 is the classification. That is this position. So that is one of the supervisory positions, one of the top tier. The reason for that is that especially with these, the nature of this bill in particular, expedited filings, if you have, say, a merger and acquisition, you're dealing with a law firm that wants to get this filing done on a date certain, we do classify this as more of a complex filing that would not be a frontline registrar. It would have to be manual intervention by someone who is senior on our staff. And so that informed the reasoning behind the BACA 08.
Any questions for the agency? Mr. Vice Chair Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Forgive me, I'm new at this. I'm trying to figure out what I am doing here. I look at the agency estimate impact, and I see a number fiscal year 26. Do we know, I'm assuming this is just for the remaining time in this, do we know the cost going on from here with what that total
Go ahead.
per year is? Thank you.
Yeah. And have Mr. Rubino ask that with your indulgence, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Pendergraft, it's a good question. It gets down into the let's see, if you're looking on the amendment, starting at line 26 is the intent of the legislature that this appropriation be doubled. So this is for just the remaining of the year. The bill itself is effective July 1, 2025, and then that would take us through the end of the biennium. So that's just one year, and then that would be part of our standard budget request for the next year. So.
Any further questions? I have one more. Is there any particular reason this is set to come out of general fund rather than other funds, the funds that you would collect in this particular program?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We have always collected these, we have always been generally funded. And we would prefer for the purposes of this, we're fine with having that discussion because we're one of the few revenue centers for the state. We bring in way more revenue than we take out, than we expend. And you know, there's only a few of them, by the way. And by the way, this position would be paid for in about a day of work. I neglected to say that in our presentation. But the question would be is the reason, and this is actually why expedited filing, in my opinion, last year died. I mean, a lot of people are saying it's because the position was in there. No, it's actually the opposite. It was because the way the position was funded was not, it was not clear that it was going to be funded because they funded it out of special revenue related to the expedited filings itself rather than all the revenue we brought in. And all the expedited filings itself, it's going to take time to build that up. And so there would be no funding then basically for the position, probably at least initially. Over time, I do think it's going to pay for itself. And we had that conversation in committee. Probably will pay for itself and more. But initially that money's not going to be there. And then I think there's also an accounting issue related to our office. There's a number of statutes you have to revise. I guess you could do it in the budget and say that supersedes, but it's a really complex discussion and frankly one that would rather roll into the interim. We've always been generally funded. And if it's out of the special revenue from expedited filings, the position won't be funded initially.
Thank you for that explanation, Mr. Secretary. So if we were in negotiations over figuring out what we're going to do with HB1, and we determined that we wanted to do it out of other funds, as long as it were out of the totality of your other funds, it wouldn't run into the problem it did in the past. Is that an accurate statement?
Mr. Chairman, it's an interesting concept, one I've thought about a lot. Yeah, because it pays for itself, the 3 positions pay for itself. My estimate was in 3 to 4 days, so we'd have to have 3 to 4 days pass, but yeah, then it would fill up, I think, after, probably give it a week just in case, but then I think the money would be there and we'd expend. I'd have to check with our fiscal person, but I don't think it's super clean. I think it's more of a discussion for a bill or discussion over the interim, but we're happy to get back to you on that if it's something that the committee wants to pursue.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Do I have any other? Yep. Go ahead, Representative Sherwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think this is also just for the benefit of, a new group getting into the routine of going through these re-referrals. So we see in our packet that we have the bill. Initially, it did not have an appropriation. So that happened in the committee. There was an amendment put on here. So that's why it was re-referred to us. And we're discussing the fiscal impact or the appropriation. On your agency estimate of administrative impact, we see the number 43,000, correct?
Yes.
And then on the budget amendment, or the amendment from committee that's in front of us now, we have the 93. Could you just, for sake of clarity, walk through why those numbers are different? Thank you.
Yeah, the 43, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood. The 43 is a half a position. So goes back to the half. But you can't have half a body.
All right, we also are funding this for 1 year until the next budget, correct?
Yeah, and that's why I think and that gets back to the earlier question. The other problem with what you posed is that the positions really we do need immediately. And so we'd have to wait till the bill became effective, which I guess in the supplemental is immediately, or is it July 1?
July 1.
Yeah, so you'd have to wait till July 1 until the bill went into effect, which would be July 1. So it's not clean. It's not the cleanest way to do it, per your question. I think the reason why the number half is a little bit off is because, again, the full number is for the 18 months, I think, right?
Well, Mr. Chairman, and I think just to speak a little bit to it, at that time when we were reached out, we had estimated, our budget request is for 3 positions, 1 at each tier. And in committee, as we kind of had illustrated, and then as we were ferreting this out, and that's part of the reason that for the re-referral to put a little more color on it, is since this is more of a complex filing, we would prefer that it would be the BACA 08. And so that was one of the things in the initial, again, there's not a lot of color that goes on the fiscal impact statements when we get them as our agency. And so at that time, what we had estimated was, okay, we think that this is a half a position from our office. In further discussions, we had sort of surmised internally, and then we communicated that, and now we're communicating it to you, is that this would be more appropriate for a BACA 08. And then that is part of the evolving discussion of, yes, our budget request stands for itself, which we would prefer 3 additional positions, 1 at each tier. However, as it relates to this particular bill, the BACA 08 is the most appropriate.
Follow-up, Sherwood, Representative Sherwood?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I'm just using this as an exercise in transparency so that when the public looks at this, they can track the conversation. And so again, that 43,000 in the request, it does look like it is the salary and the benefit costs. And then if you doubled that, it's still below the amount that's in the amendment. So I'm just trying to flesh out the difference between the 93 and some change and the 86. How did we go from doubling this amount? So from a part-time position to a full-time position, but then the numbers still don't add up. So I'm just trying to flesh out where that difference occurred.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Representative Sherwood, I think it's a $3,000 disparity. I think we go back and we'll get an answer for you on that. But it's on the low end. So in that way, probably appropriations it should actually, if it's doubled, right, it should be 96, right? Or no, it's 86, yeah.
All right, further questions?
So you think it's because of the zero?
Well, before we get to that, do we have any other agencies that want to weigh in on this? Departments? Okay, Representative Wiley, would you like to speak to this? Representative Singh, would you like to speak to this? This is the bill that you were managing, is that right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this. I apologize for being late. Just from the blockchain committee, this was thoroughly deliberated, and it was made absolutely clear that this presents an opportunity for an additional service that the Secretary of State can provide to the people of Wyoming, that this will make things, it will allow for the opportunity for speedy business transactions, and this is something that we ended up supporting, so.
Thank you. Is there any other further comment? Do we have anyone online, Ms. Jones? Okay. Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Singh, as you were in the committee when this amendment was brought, and as was pointed out a few minutes ago, the 86 and 93 numbers are not alike. Do you have any insight into that? Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't have a copy of the bill in front of me. Sure. I'm sorry, Representative, can you repeat that?
Through the chair, please.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Absolutely. In your initial request, there's an agency estimate administrative impact, and it includes $43,000 for what I understand is for half a year. And then there was an amendment brought, and the total ask is $93,000, which is apparently for a year, and yet 43 twice used to be 86 when I was in school. And the 86 doesn't match the 93, and I'm trying to get to the bottom of that first of all, and then the second one is, what are we looking at for this fiscal year? We're looking at half of the 93, just looking for some clarity.
I'm going to go ahead and answer that. It's going to be half of the amendment, which is half of the 93. That's what we're going to be voting on for this year, and then that would be brought forward as part of the standard budget in future years, should we pass this. So if you want to amend it to match the original estimate by the Secretary or the revised, which does in fact match our HB1 numbers for that position 008. So you can amend it if you'd like, or you can just pass it as it's sort of already amended to the correct number on the very last page of your packet in the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, can I weigh in?
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Mr.
Thank you,
Secretary.
Mr. Chairman. Again, the fiscal impact is based on a half an FTE, but you can't have half a body. So it's half a body for 1 year. So to do it for 1 year, we've got to have the full amount. I think what happened is our deputy probably didn't use the higher classification. He might have had the lower classification when our intent was to do the higher one. And then when we had the fiscal analyst pull the higher one, so that's why there's the disparity. But the 93 was what we pulled on Monday when it was heard. Mr. Rubino did that. And so that's the number. And I'm 95% sure, and I will be 100% sure.
So,
within
Mr.
the day.
Secretary, before Mr. Rubino answers, it should be safe to say that the accurate number would be not the 93,000, because it needs to be for 1 year until our next budget, correct? We need to amend this to be half of this salary amount that you're asking for position 008. Is that
Mr.
accurate?
Chairman, no, it's, that's for 1 year.
This
So
is 1 year. Oh, that's right. I'm
The estimate
sorry.
was for half of a position
You're
for
right.
1 year. And yes, that's correct. Just to provide a little more color, and that was what I was getting at earlier, was when we initially provided the estimate, it was a rougher estimate. First of all, it was, I believe it was kind of an average. It was just an added position, and we have the 3 different levels within our business division. And so, yes, we were just we weren't throwing anything out, but we were saying, well, this would be a half of a position within our business division. Now, it's pretty hard to say, right? Because we have 3 different tiers within our business division at roughly 3 different salary levels for our main 3 classifications. Your junior registrar, senior consumer support specialist. And so then when we went to budget prior to the corporations committee meeting in which we discussed this, or I believe it was the minerals committee this was originally heard, then we had budget actually pull salary, employee benefits, hardware, maintenance agreement, telecom. And so it adds a little bit more. That does not exactly add up, but the disparity comes from both telecom, maintenance agreement, hardware, those are fixed costs, and then just that it was an average of that position. As we were discussing that, we made clear that, we're again sort of iterating that here, is that it's the BACA 08 because it's more of a complex filing. And so that sheds a little bit more, hopefully that sheds a little bit more color on where that comes from. That number comes from, and Mr. Chairman, you're correct, that matches the BACA 08 request for our budget request. That is the contingency. If any one of those goes in, then this would come out. That's for the BACA 08 from that.
Okay, thank you for that.
But it's just for 1
clarification.
year.
Thank you for that clarification, Mr. Rubino. Any further questions of the agency? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I actually thought I was pretty good until the last definition. If we look at in the budget, the BACA 08 in your budget request, that's 115,837 but is that 18 months? Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that is effective immediately for 18 months. I know, it gets a
Very
little,
good.
yeah.
Very good.
And really, I mean, it's not effective till July 1, so it wouldn't have worked, but it's not a like for like, because it's a 12-month instead of 18 months, which is the budget ask, but.
Any further questions? All right, do we have any further testimonies? Is there anyone in the room or online? Okay. All right, public testimony is closed, but what is the committee's pleasure? All right, we want to move the bill. Any discussion about the bill? About the amendment? Representative Sherwood.
Mr. Chairman, for conversation, I will make a motion to expend these funds out of the general business filings through the Secretary of State.
Okay, the motion's been presented to take this out of special funds rather than general funds. Is there a second? No second, that fails upon without a second. Okay, any further discussion? Any motions? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to accept this fiscal note as written, as the correct one of the 93,179, not the 43,43 one.
All right, so the motion would actually be to recommend due pass as amended.
I will second that.
Seconded by Representative Allemand. Ms. Childress, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote on House Bill 47 as amended. Representative Allemand? Aye. Representative Angelos?
Aye.
Representative Haroldson? Aye. Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Thank you, Representative Singh. Okay, now we'll be moving on to House Bill 33. And we have Chairman Brown for us. Welcome, Chairman Brown, to Appropriations. We're a very new committee. But we're anxious to hear your bill and about it. It's appropriation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this bill actually does not contain an appropriation, but is previously discussed in the chairman's meeting with the Speaker of the House. I re-referred this bill for your guys' consideration just to understand the implications of this bill, because this does have a fiscal impact to your budget as you guys are starting to work this. And kind of give you an understanding of where this committee came from, what we did during the interim, and why this bill is in front of you is back in 2017, we had a $360 million shortfall that Governor Meade tasked the legislature to find ways to shore this up. Portion of that funding came out of YDOT, as they had roughly at that time about a $44 million appropriation from the general fund. In that same time frame, YDOT was asked to go ahead and come off of general fund, and in the process we would find a way to raise $40 million. And if you remember, during that time frame, there was a $5 increase in the license plate fee at the state level, and also I believe a $20 fee increase on your driver's license. That created about a $40 million windfall on that side, but it was a $40 million deficit on the general fund side. So it was a wash. At the problem that we faced at that point is YDOT had slowly become revenue generating only on their end for those two pieces of information, and then federal funding at that point as well. So over the past, what are we going on now, 9 years, they have been operating at a general fund deficit compared to what they had been receiving for the 10 to 20 years prior to that, where we had put as much as $200+ million into surface transportation, airports, signs, those types of things. So the committee this year was tasked with trying to find a way to shore up a little bit of the deficit that YDOT was facing, specifically with our roads. And if you have traveled the southwest part of the state on I-80 recently, you understand what I'm talking about. And I'm sure there's probably some others in your neck of the woods as well. We had 2 bills presented to us, passed out of the committee as interim committee bills. One of them was defeated yesterday in committee, and then this one was brought forward. What you have before you is a small adjustment to the sales tax collection of a vehicle. And we found a nexus between, if you're buying a vehicle, chances are you're going to be driving it on the road. I will admit that you're not going to always be driving it on the road, because there are some ranchers and farmers out there that are going to buy vehicles, drive it on their 2-track, and they're never going to touch our public roads. The vast majority of the vehicles that are purchased and paid sales tax on are going to drive on the roads, and that is where this idea was generated from. So what you have before you is a diversion of roughly, and I needed to make sure I give you guys exact numbers here. The fiscal note that you'll see is roughly $69 million this year, and then that increases slowly but surely by roughly $1 million a year over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, and so on and so forth. This is a policy decision more than a tax implication, but there is the policy decision to be made by not only you guys as you guys move forward, but the committee and the general body as well, is do we want to remove $70 million from the general fund that would typically be going to fund other state agencies and fund this into YDOT based off of the sales tax usage? What I will tell you is the 2 bills together would have presented somewhere in the range of about $340 million, and that would have been over the course of a biennium. The other bill that was defeated yesterday removed a major portion of that. So what you're seeing right now is a $70 million per year or $140 million per biennium plug into YDOT's infrastructure needs to continue to maintain the roads that we have right now. The director and their CFO are here today if you guys would like to ask them any direct questions. I re-referred this strictly on the request of the chairman as well as the speaker, that you guys understand what the liability and the implications are of removing $70 million from the general fund and bringing that strictly over to YDOT, and for better or less earmarking that for YDOT. Mr. Chairman, that is the bill and why we sent this forward.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Questions for Chairman Brown? Vice Chairman Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Brown, I just would like you to refresh our memory. You mentioned it when you first began. What does YDOT estimate their shortfall to be, and is that an annual or biannual number?
Mr. Chairman, through you, Representative Pendergraft, great question. And I believe I'll probably get kicked in the back here if I get this wrong. But 4 years ago, there was a study by a group called DI, is that right? DI, that they, YDOT, is when I say they, hired out to find out what are we doing with the information and the money that we have, and where do we need to be better? And that entire study came back and looked at everything across the board, from their buildings to snow plows to highway patrol, telecommunications, you name it, and surface transportation, aeronautics, and that came to the range of about 400 million a year. So that equates to just underneath $1 billion a biennium that we are short in our YDOT funding. So this is a plug in the right direction, in my opinion. After sitting on this committee for 8 years, I've watched the same, as I told the director, this has been the same song. It's just sung by a different artist, and this is now my 4th artist singing this same song. This is at least a step in the right direction, in my opinion, to make sure our roads do not deteriorate completely.
Thank you. Follow up? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Brown, Chairman Brown, thank you very much for being here today and talking about this. Can you help, and I'm going to show a little my ignorance on this, can you help me when you say this will be pulling out of general fund? I understand that. But as a whole right now, are the sales tax on vehicles, what is that predominantly funding currently? So like when you say other agencies, like what would we be seeing this dropping that water level down on other people?
It's a loaded question. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through you to Representative Harrelson, that's a loaded question. I could simply tell you that that is going to DEQ. I could tell you that that's going to the Department of Family Services, state parks, you name it. It's general fund, right? It's a 70 million drop in general fund. And so what we're doing is we're taking that scoop out of the general fund. How you guys decide to make that cut to general fund or fill that is the prerogative of this committee. But in the long run, it is the prerogative of this committee how that is ultimately seen or felt in the budget.
Thank you, Chairman Brown. Follow up? Good. All right. Any further discussion, questions at this point for the Chairman Brown? All right. Would the department like to come up and share anything with us? Please state your name and your department and position for the public record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Committee. Darren Westby, Director of Wyoming Department of Transportation. I think the chairman explained the bill really well, but just clarifying what was really, I think, not a sticking point, but a really strong point about the bill is we really focused on just the stateside sales tax, that stateside portion of the sales tax on vehicles. We did not get in the middle of the local government disbursements of the sales tax. So it's just the stateside portion of it, and everything else I believe you're spot on, but would stand for any questions.
Okay. Any questions for the director? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as we're looking at $500 million potential shortfall, my suspension knows that. I mean, we're seeing it. I mean, I think all of us can agree it's actually a brilliant idea to put committees all over the state so we have to drive all these roads and realize the problems we're up against, right? And we obviously don't want to pull anything from parks, right?
Correct.
Okay. But my question is, obviously 69 to 72 million is a far cry from $500 million, but I do believe it's the right direction. So let me ask this question. Another bill that would have helped shore this up more, we lost. Is like, what other horses do we have in the race for this? Is this it this year? I mean, is this what we're looking at for trying to instigate a fix on that shortfall, or do we have something else coming down the pike that we're going to hear as well?
I think that's really a question for the chairman.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Harrelson, I can kind of give you an understanding of what the committee did throughout the interim. We tasked the director and LSO to go out and give us a myriad of different revenue, either generation or redirection bills. Recognizing that we're all in a situation where none of us really want to raise taxes, it was never in the purview of our committee to bring you a revenue generation bill. I will tell you that there is likely going to be at least 2, if not 3 bills filed by individual members probably within the next day or 2 to do those types of things. Former appropriators is what I will tell you. They are not happy with the understanding of diverting funds because they see what they see is a level playing field where everything's at right now. So, you're right. If we needed to find $400 million, it's not easy. What I would say in response to that is, how do you eat an elephant, right? And it's one step at a time and one bite at a time. So, and I think this is a small portion. It's actually a significant portion when you look at a biennialized budget. $150 million is not small, but that only represents about a quarter of what we actually need, and not even quite that. So I will tell you that I think that there are rubber tax that has been discussed. So if you buy a tire, windshield wipers, anything like that, oil change taxes. There was a fuel tax proposition brought forward at the rack as opposed to at the pump. So 10 cents would equate to 40 million. 45 million. And that was quickly defeated. We weren't going to consider that. So there was a lot of discussions on how can we handle shoring up a little bit of what's going on with YDOT and the recognition and the fact that we need to do something, but we don't hit the pocketbooks of our constituents. And these were the 2 bills that we had. One of them was a rediversion of the 1% severance tax. That's the bill that died yesterday. And then we have this one, which is the state side. The other thing that I will say on this is you will see there is an administrative impact on this. We did not motion, we did not move that forward. There will likely be an amendment on the floor to bring in an appropriation of $100,000 to help the Department of Revenue do their programming for this, because it's actually a pretty complicated process to receive all those returns on these vehicle purchases back to the state, figure out what the stateside portion of that is, put that through the formula, and then redistribute only sales tax only on vehicles back out to the communities through the Madden formula. It's a pretty complex deal. So the Department of Revenue asked for $100,000. The committee kind of balked at that and said, we'll see what the committee, the whole feels, but we're not going to be bringing anything like that forward, not only to you guys, but just didn't want to entertain that yesterday.
Pendergraph.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was my pleasure for the last 2 years to sit on transportation, and I heard a number of discussions during that time about, we know that this deficit has been going on for some time, and I would like for you to bring this committee up to speed, I guess, a little bit on how you've been coping with that. And then I also would like to hear a little bit about how you prioritize between horizontal and vertical construction and where this money might be applied.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative. Thank you for the lead-in on this one. Always proud to talk about how prideful and passionate my team is. We have people that are, and Representative Smith has got some relation in our agency and can attest to the pride and passion of sections of roads that our crew gets to work on, and they will work diligently to ensure that smoothest ride, safest ride possible, and so I'm very passionate about that. Where we've gotten to, as the chairman talked about, our funding reductions, or I shouldn't say, revenue reductions and revenue increases have been flat for 20 years. So we've been flat revenue-wise for 20 years. Obviously, inflation has eaten up and our buying power has just gone down and down and down. The amount of roads that we can maintain are just continuing to shrink, and we're getting to a point of concern. And so about 14, 15 years ago, the agency, long before I was here, made the conscious decision, and I applaud them for their decision, to go into what they call a preservation-only mode, where all they're doing is just maintaining roads. They're trying not to grow the capacity, adding more passing lanes or adding wider shoulders or creating 4-lane highways, just anything that could add to the quantity of road that we have to maintain, because we can't maintain them at the level that we should be at this point. Why would we add more to the plate? And so rightfully so, they went into preservation only mode. I don't think anybody in the agency 15 years ago thought that this was a long-term, this is the way we're doing business. We get asked nonstop, when are you gonna fix 287 South? When are we fixing 59 North out of Douglas right to Gillette? When are we fixing 2026? Fixing. When are we gonna add passing lanes? When are we gonna create some safety improvements to these roads? Highway 30 in the southwest part of the state is getting a lot of attention right now in our agency because of the request of the congestion that's happening. We got I-25, I-80 intersection here in Laramie County that's going to become it's already a congestion issue and a safety issue. We got to start going on that. So I asked the crew, what did we have as an exit strategy to come out of preservation only mode? And there's a lot of blank looks. I don't think anybody considered that it would take 15 years to get out of this. And so gratefully, the interim committee took up funding for us as an interim topic, and we dove into it. And I really applaud LSO's efforts as well as my staff's efforts to come up with all sorts of really interesting ideas. Some of them were bake sale on the side of how much they would actually help move the needle. Some of them were significant, like the 2 bills that came forward. And so we were appreciative of everybody's efforts there. But going into the future, looking at an astronomical deficit of $400 million a year, it's a big elephant. And you're right, one bite at a time, we'll start to achieve that so long as we can stay up with inflation and we don't continue to go backwards. The other concern we have, we're 70% funded by the federal government on the roadside. And the reliance on that is becoming more scarier and more scarier just because of the fact of where we get our funding from the federal government. It's come from the National Highway Trust Fund. That is funded almost purely by, or historically by, the national gas tax. So we pay a stateside gas tax on top of a national gas tax. With the efficiency of the vehicles over the course of years, that gas tax in revenue has gone down. So the federal government's been shoring up the deficit or the delta between what the states, what they send out to the states and what they collect with general fund. Our concern, looking in the crystal ball, how long is the federal government willing to backfill the deficit with general fund? We're seeing here in another year and a half, I believe, they're gonna start going into reauthorization of the federal highway transportation bill. We're fighting like crazy with our delegation to ensure that we can at least maintain what we're getting. I think we're trying hard and understanding that we are not going to see more. Matter of fact, this last year, we saw a $30 million decrease in bridge funding that we were programming and had to quit programming $30 million this year alone. So we're concerned of what's going to happen to the federal dollar. Now, what that will do, it will make my percentages look better. You know, if the federal dollar goes down, my percentages might look better, but I'm going backwards several $100 million a year in what I can put on the roads. And so balancing all of the needs of the agency, whether it's the horizontal road, highway infrastructure, our vertical infrastructure also went in. I can't even say they went into preservation only mode. They went into 100%, we're not doing anything mode, and which is not an appropriate thing to do. So we're trying to shore that up as well. Equipment is starting to catch back up a little bit. Aeronautics is holding their own as well, but and we appreciate, we did get back on the general fund $8.6 million per biennium for WileLink, the public safety communications. And so we're trying to do what we can to give a level of service that everybody requires on our highway. So thank you. I've tried to bundle it all in really short amount of time, but it's a lot, and really appreciate the opportunity.
Follow-up, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and very quickly, because we're going to be running short on time. the limitations on federal monies. Federal monies can be used for certain things and not for others. Would you just touch on that briefly?
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Representative, thank you for that question. Federal dollars that we get on the formula side of the House, as well as any discretionary grants that we are successful at getting, are very specific to road construction and significant maintenance. So shave and paves, which is what the preservation only mode is, where we shave 2 inches and we add 2 inches, so the surface looks good. It does not go into road maintenance like your snowplow drivers, cleaning up the side of the highways, our facilities, highway patrol, public safety communications. It can't cover that. It can only go towards road construction and significant maintenance.
Okay, any further questions for the director? All right, thank you, Director Westby.
Thank you all.
Is there any other testimony in the room? Representative Wiley. And Ms. Childress, do we have anyone online for this? Okay. Welcome to Appropriations.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, committee, thank you for having us in here today, and thanks for hearing this bill. So 2 years ago, on transportation, we were charged with finding an answer to how to fund YDOT with hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in the hole and not being able to keep up with the roads. And you heard it's like spreading peanut butter on a poor man's toast. You just keep spreading it thinner and thinner, and nothing happens. So, and I would like to add, I've had the distinct pleasure to serve on the committee with both Representative Pendergraft and Representative Smith. So they're intimately informed on this issue and how we work through these different things. Because like you heard from the good chairman, we talked about taxation. We didn't really want to put the extra burden on the people, especially now with inflation and how hard it is to make a buck stretch as it is. And then as you heard earlier in testimony, the other bill that we had brought forward, several of us didn't think that it was a more equitable thing to do. This bill actually taps into the sales for motor vehicles that are going to be on the road to help fund the road maintenance. This is not increasing taxation. This is just doing something to where you're taking some of this money out of the general fund, putting it back into the roads so we can keep something that our folks can keep using. And it helps us across the board. It helps us to get here, when we come convene session safely. It helps our industry every day, when we're moving our products across our highways. So with the difficult decisions that we were given and the problems presented in front of us, I believe that this is the most stable and equitable, we use the word equitable quite a bit, way to give YDOT something. And did we give them everything they asked for? Absolutely not. We said, here you go. Here's something. It's better than nothing. Please find efficiencies, work forward into the future, and I'd be open to any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Representative Wiley. Questions for Representative Wiley? Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Wiley, we had talked about a trigger bill that was associated should either of these bills that we've mentioned today go through. Obviously, if this one goes through, would you describe what then happens, how that trigger bill works?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Pendergraft, or Representative Pendergraft, sorry. Yeah, we had also discussed the trigger bill, that if this does go through, it's going to trigger an efficiency study for YDOT. So if we go through that, we can look at operations, within the different operations within the department and find more efficient ways to do things and try to save a buck there as well. Okay. So by no means is this moving forward without any kind of obligation or responsibility for the department. It's not just a free, here you go, here's a bunch of money. It's here you go, here's some funding, and by the way, we need to look at how to make that funding stretch.
Follow up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And also, Representative Wiley, would you describe the funding for that study? How is that study funded?
I'm going to stop you there. We're really running out of time, and this is talking about a different bill. So maybe we can have that conversation offline. So I apologize, but we could have that conversation later. I'd like to stick to this bill. Do you have any further comments on this bill here?
I would just be open to any other questions or concerns that you guys have and see if you would like to address anything before we leave.
Any further questions for Representative Wiley? All right, thank you for being here. Appreciate the testimony. Okay. Any further testimony? All right, we're going to close public testimony, and what's the pleasure of the committee?
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Second? Okay, seconded by Representative Smith, and let's go ahead and go through it. So, any changes to page 1? Comments? Page 2? Page 3? Page 4? All right. Any discussion on the bill? Go ahead, Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In serving on this committee for the last 2 years, I really wanted to find a way out of this. I did go back and look at the last 15 years at least of funding, and what the director cited is accurate. The funding has been basically flat. In fact, the state ask now is $20 million less than it was 12 or 14 years ago. And for me, it comes down to what is the basic role of government? Basic role of government, one of the fundamental things, provide roads and bridges and the maintenance of them. At the same time that they were held flat, other departments, one in particular, saw a rise from 900 million to 2.3 billion. And I would argue that maybe we need to look at that. You know, where are we focusing? When the money gets tight, we need to do the things that are essential and take care of them adequately and wisely. And then some of these other things, maybe we need to take a harder look at them.
Thank you, Representative Pendergraft. Any other committee members? Any motions? Representative Harrelson.
I move to pass.
Okay. You've heard the motion. Do I have a second? Seconded by Representative Allemand. All right, Ms. Childress, would you please take the roll?
Roll call vote on House Bill 33 do pass. Representative Allemand? Aye. Representative Angelos? Aye. Representative Harrelson?
Aye.
Representative Pendergraft?
Aye.
Representative Sherwood?
Aye.
Representative Smith?
Aye.
Chairman Bear?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, 7 ayes.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and good luck on the floor with that bill. You bet. All right. And we are adjourned, so let's go to our next meeting.